AC Shadows is truly the greatest success in Ubisoft's entire corporate history, having catapulted itself all the way up to the coveted top 40 most played games on Steam, only overshadowed by such quintuple A juggernauts as the Euro Truck Simulator, wallpaper engine, and of course the unstoppable gaming titan Banana. Yes, the game's performance is so spectacular that Ubisoft stock has soared in the opposite direction, plummeting another 2% this week. If that doesn't scream victory, then I don't know what does. But rest assured, the Ubisoft chills are positively glowing with pride. AC Shadows is a triumphant return to form, they say, while conveniently ignoring that the combat looks worse than in PS2 games, the stealth is somehow worse than in 20-year-old titles, and the story looks like it was penned by some fanfiction writer with absolutely no taste or talent. Let's also not forget the once again lacking assassin element in an Assassin's Creed title. That's right, Ubisoft has mastered the art of building a non-assassin Assassin's Creed game, which should tell you absolutely everything that there is to know about this title. And naturally, we're all supposed to be shocked. Shocked, I tell you, that the game turned out to be every bit the disaster any sane individual predicted months ago. Because who could have possibly foreseen that from the very first gameplay footage, where every aspect from stealth to combat to the 5 lines spoken in the gameplay looked utterly horrible. Certainly not the folks who spent a year telling us that we were blinded by negativity. But don't worry, looking at its track record, gaming media has our backs this time, labeling this dumpster fire a return to form, much like Failguard was a return to form before it bombed so hard nobody would even touch it for free on PS Plus. At least Failguard had a sad little graph Jason Schreier could tweet to prove the haters wrong until he quietly admitted 2 months later that it flopped. Truly one of the industry insiders of all time right there. In the case of Shadows, the journals don't even have a little pity chart to hype this entire disaster up. The silent shame is rather deafening. So that brings us to the heart of today's video. Why on earth are these shills so hellbent on defending garbage? Especially when you can see from a mile away that it's going to crash and burn. Why do they cling to their pre-release copium for an entire year, then blow $70 on a product that was obviously circling the drain, only to turn around and seethe about it when the rest of us have already moved on with our lives? And why can't we just call out trash the minute we see it, instead of doing this tedious wait and see guys routine and then act all surprised when the game turns out to be trash 6 months later? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tosty Gaming. Today I'm putting on my hazmat suit as we dive into the mind of a dedicated Ubisoft shill and discover why trash is so irresistible to those determined to defend it. Let's start by examining the glowing media reception for this so-called unparalleled masterpiece. According to virtually every gaming outlet in every corner of the world, AC Shadows is a return to form. In fact, even the German-speaking press here in Austria regurgitates the same tired phrase. Shadows bringt die Reihe wieder auf Kurs, which literally means it's putting the series back on track. Weirdly enough, these same outlets once gave Origins and Odyssey higher scores than Shadows and dished out roughly the same reviews for Mirage and Valhalla. So which is it? Was Assassin's Creed perfectly fine all of these years, or was it languishing in mediocrity only to be magically saved by Shadows? Or could it be that gaming media has no clue what it's talking about and just labels every piece of corporate shovelware a return to form? Given how they handled the infamous Cuphead tutorial debacle, and of course the yellow paintgate situation, I'm leaning toward the latter. But of course, these outlets assume the average mouth-breathing reader isn't sharp enough to compare current Assassin's Creed review scores with the previous ones, meaning nobody notices that they never once suggested the series fell off in the first place. Now they're suddenly raving about how Shadows fixes everything as if there was anything to fix according to them. It's almost sad how nobody bothered to update the NPC script in game journalism after the train wreck that was Failguard. At least Failguard could be labeled as a return to form in the sense that there hasn't been a Dragon Age title in forever, so the media could lie and claim it successfully continued the legacy of Dragon Age. But that same mindless hype script doesn't work with AC Shadows because these same outlets were shilling its predecessor AC Mirage as a glorious return to form with traditional stealth and basically as good as Assassin's Creed 2 just 2 years ago. When everything is a so-called return to form, then maybe nothing really is. At least we can easily figure out why the media is falling over itself to defend Assassin's Creed Shadows. Most of the gaming community despises it. Some because it's the final nail in the coffin of a once great and beloved franchise, I'm right there, and most because it's a diversity masterpiece but a game design dumpster fire. This time we get an enlightened African American magically plunked into Sengoku-era Japan with no added context. Ubisoft's Yasuke is so superior to those pesky light-skinned Japanese folks that he masters samurai skills in just 6 months, steps off the Portuguese slave ship, and basically immediately takes command of half of Oda Nobunaga's army. Samurai training took decades, but here he's a master swordsman in half a year, outdueling lifelong warriors and essentially being morally superior to all of Japan the whole time. Now, if you think that that's some bold revisionism, buckle up. AC Shadows doesn't stop at Yasuke magically becoming Nobunaga's right-hand man. Oh no. They also have him shack up with Nobunaga's sister, historically revered and very much married at the time, and then top it all off by making Yasuke the one who personally executes Nobunaga after his seppuku. If that's not some next-level fanfiction, then I don't know what is. This isn't just rewriting history, it's practically a fever dream. The creators aren't even trying to stay within 100 miles of the record or to even minimally respect the original historical events. This is the kind of creative liberty that crosses the line into cultural vandalism, turning iconic Japanese figures into props for someone's outlandish fantasy. The most annoying aspect of this entire situation is that I knew that there was going to be an attempt at this cheap fanfiction coming because that info was leaked in the art book. I just couldn't be bothered to make a video explaining how bad the story was going to be before Shadows actually released, but the seppuku scene is right there, described in quite a lot of detail, as well as a hint that Lady Oichi would, for lack of a better term, hook up with Yasuke. Now the cat is out of the bag, and naturally Japanese gamers who call out this clown show get labeled racist. Never mind that one of Japan's largest conservative-leaning newspapers, Sankei Shimbun, regularly criticizes the Disneyfication of Japanese culture by the West. While it's not an academic journal, Sankei is a serious outlet with ties to Japan's conservative intellectual class, and it reflects a broader Japanese disdain for Western revisionism of its own culture. A normal audience would see this entire storyline in AC Shadows as embarrassing fanfiction at best, a vanity project by someone so bent on pushing a narrative of African superiority that it shreds any historical reality. At worst, it's a dangerous case of historical revisionism, an attempt by the very specific Western social milieu, the bourgeoisie bohème, to impose its worldview and burnish its moral halo, using Japanese culture as a convenient backdrop. The problem with this is that gaming journalists aren't normal people like you or me. They're part of the same hyper-privileged and elitist bourgeois bohème stratum. The data backs it up. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, nearly 90% of US media jobs are in big coastal metropolitan areas like New York or San Francisco. 78% of journalists hold a bachelor's degree. Another 8% hold degrees that are higher than a bachelor's degree, and those degrees are very expensive. So yes, the vast majority are college-educated, hyper-urban, and living in cultural bubbles. What I might also add, what we know from European empirical data, is that the kids studying journalism are among the wealthiest out there. Not in the sense that they have a lot of money themselves, but that they come from rather wealthy and privileged families, because studying journalism is more of a privilege and not really a job you study if you plan to earn a lot of money, meaning you usually need a family that can financially support you throughout your studies and also throughout your professional life later on. On top of that, in the US, many journalists pull in around $80,000 a year, while the average American is stuck at only $50,000 as their salary. This can be easily checked by sites like Glassdoor. Is it really surprising then that the average journo just can't connect with everyday gamers? They exist in a different universe, a world of $7 lattes, overpriced rent, and never-ending diversity seminars. So when a game like AC Shadows shows up rewriting Japanese history to fit some contrived narrative, these journalists lap it up. If it irks regular gamers, whom they see as backward, toxic, and uneducated, that's just a bonus. They don't even need Ubisoft's money to defend Shadows because in their milieu it's automatically righteous. Diversity a la AC Shadows is perfect for virtue signaling, and anyone who criticizes it must be an uneducated fascist who needs to be cancelled. They're not gamers, they're cultural elites who see diversity as a moral flex within their bubble, not a legitimate creative vision or something that really needs to be strived towards in any meaningful way. The contempt of those cultural elites within journalism isn't even subtle, it's an open policy that's rather noticeable. To them, gamers are class enemies. We can come from working class backgrounds, rural towns, normal middle class suburbs, or even from major metropolitan areas. We can come from various societal strata, socioeconomically or politically speaking, but what sets us apart, we're never parts of those very small, hyper-progressive elites within the very city centers, within those fancy, educated jobs that you only do in order to have a sense of moral superiority or to change the world. That's what sets the bourgeoisie bohème so apart from the entire remainder of society. Even worse, unlike those people, we unapologetically prefer fun over lectures on proper representation. So to these journalists, AC Shadows is just another tool to push their social agenda. On some subconscious level, they will always champion games like this precisely because everyday gamers hate them. At least now you know what's going on. The average games journalist doesn't want to engage with you or your criticisms. They want to dominate the cultural discourse, no matter how many historical facts get twisted. They're part of a class that literally can't stand you, and if defending a historically tone-deaf, terrible fever dream like AC Shadows is what it takes to thumb their nose at the toxic plebs, they'll do it with a smile. But let's not pretend that the Ubisoft Defense Force is only made up of professional journalists. There's a whole army of regular online defenders, digital foot soldiers in the broader culture war who'll leap to shield AC Shadows the moment anyone questions its artistic or historical or, God forbid, quality merits. These aren't paid pros, they're just well-intentioned, well, at least sometimes well-intentioned, people who've been roped in by the game's marketing and social messaging. Ubisoft knows exactly how to spin representation to trigger a Pavlovian response. Critics get labeled as bigots, while supporters instantly feel morally superior just for liking the game. Boom, you've got an instant human shield. It doesn't matter if the game itself is barely functional or riddled with historical nonsense or plays terribly. If you say anything negative, you're automatically against diversity. Congratulations, you've now lost the entire argument before it even starts. Suddenly, regular gamers, some of whom probably wanted just a decent Assassin's Creed titles, find themselves fighting a culture war instead of assessing the game for its own merits. By the time they realize they've been used as pawns in a corporate PR strategy, it's far too late. The conversation has shifted from "is AC Shadows any good?" to "are you a hateful troglodyte for disliking it?" Mission accomplished for Ubisoft. So if you ever see a Twitter thread filled with random accounts repeating corporate PR buzzwords about subverting expectations, much needed diversity, or a return to form, remember, these folks aren't all disingenuous shills. Many are just average players who got caught up in a marketing spin, now doubling down to avoid admitting they were sold on a lie, and that, my friends, is how these publishers weaponize social issues, turning unsuspecting fans into cultural body armor for even the most disastrous projects. And there you have it. A game so laughably off the mark it might as well just be a parody propped up by a cheer squad of professional journals and everyday defenders alike, both of whom have been whipped into a cultural frenzy by buzzwords and corporate spin. AC Shadows isn't just a failing product. It's a symptom of an industry that values virtue signaling over genuine creativity and a media landscape that happily echoes the party line if it means feeling more enlightened than the rest of us. But at the end of the day, no amount of scolding or moral lecturing will convince people to pretend a subpar game is some grand masterpiece, especially when it tramples on actual history just so badly. The sooner publishers, journalists, and the last remaining Twitter and Reddit crusaders realize that, the sooner we might get games that are actually worth playing. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Ubisoft's latest masterpiece. If you enjoyed this rant, or if you just enjoy watching gaming train wrecks, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Until next time, stay toasty. Cheers.